Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be ranking every game in the Devil May Cry series. Now I guess I should give context on how I've played the Devil May Cry games. So, I am a very casual Devil May Cry fan. I actually didn't even play the games until just recently. What ended up happening is I finally had the opportunity to give Devil May Cry 5 a shot, and beforehand, I decided, you know what, I might as well just play all the other games. So I played Devil May Cry's 1 through 4. I even bought DMC and played that. And then I also eventually played Devil May Cry 5. So essentially, I played every game in the series very close to each other, with me having very minimal experience with the series beforehand. And now, with the 1 year anniversary of Devil May Cry 5 coming up, might as well just make a video on the series. And I don't think people are going to like my rankings here. I think definitely some people are going to disagree with some placements. But again, at the end of the day, it is my opinion. It's all based on how I played the series. So let's just jump into it with number 6. Now, at number 6, I do have one of the least popular games in the series. It's something I just really didn't care for while I was playing, and that's Devil May Cry 2. I know one of the reasons a lot of people don't like Devil May Cry 2 is because it's too easy. For me, that wasn't really a factor. I don't really play games for difficulty. It's not really something that I really factor in. If anything, I actually factor in the opposite. If a game's too difficult, I definitely take some points away from it. But for Devil May Cry 2, it wasn't that it was too easy. For me, it was just boring. I just didn't find the narrative interesting at all. I felt like it was such a disconnect from every other game in the franchise, where Dante just felt like a completely different person. There's a lot of characters in this game that never show up ever again. I feel like even canonically, they have no clue what to do with this, where they've kind of changed the spot of where it takes place in the timeline over time. Like, it's just not an interesting game to me. I just felt myself bored from playing it. And while there are minor gameplay improvements within it, I mean things like giving the enemies a health bar and adding new abilities that you use to solve puzzles and all that stuff. Like, there are improvements in this game from the first game, but after a couple hours in, I just found it very hard to continue. It really just wasn't a game I was enjoying, so for me, it still lands here at number 6. Now at number 5, I think this is going to be an unpopular opinion here. I know a lot of people have this game in very high regard, and I understand why. It's just, for me, I think after playing all the games in the series, for me, it just ranks pretty low. And at number 5, I have Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening. Yeah, I know a lot of people have this ranked number 1 or 2, but for me, it's just a game that I think the problem with this is that I played it immediately after playing 1 and 2. I think by the time I got to 3, I think I was getting a bit drained of the Devil May Cry series, to the point where I did take a break after 3. Before coming back for 4. And again, that largely painted my experience with 3, and that's a lot of the reason why it is this low on the list. I just felt like, while, again, gameplay-wise, it did have some minor improvements, it was just more of the same, and after having played 2 games of this already, it just kind of bored me. I do think narratively it is better than probably both of the previous games. I think Dante's definitely a much more fleshed out character. I think there's a lot more humor in this game. The controls are a lot better. The camera is better, thank God. And I will say that's probably a better game, especially a better Devil May Cry game, than some games we'll be talking about later on the list. But for me, again, my experience with it obviously affects the placement of it. And considering I just felt myself kind of, again, bored by its gameplay at this point, considering it was just more of the same, because of that, that does land here at number 5. Now at number 4 is, well, it's Devil May Cry 4. Again, Devil May Cry 4 is more of the same. It's more of Devil May Cry 3. Again, I think slightly better graphically. We get a different character in Nero. But for me, again, it's more Devil May Cry. It's what you would expect from the series. Very minor improvements gameplay-wise. Narratively, I do think they try a bit more. Again, there is a new character, Nero, and we get to like slowly find out like what Dante is doing through this game as well, and what Nero's connection to Dante is. I do enjoy that aspect of the game. But I felt like almost everything else was very similar to Devil May Cry 3. But with a series like Devil May Cry, I feel like gameplay-wise, it's kind of destined to just improve over time. As I said, like, each game is kind of like a minor improvement upon the previous one, because there's not much to ruin. It's more so about level design and narrative. For me, I feel like Devil May Cry 4 definitely does that better than Devil May Cry's 2 and 3. Though I did find myself frustrated with certain platforming sections in this game, and certain puzzles. And again, a bit of series burnout by this point, so because of that, it ranks here at number 4. Now at number 3 is a game that I expected to be much lower on the list when I initially played it, but I think in retrospect, it's definitely a game that's stuck to my mind, and that is Devil May Cry 1. And it's a very simplistic game. It's a very simplistic game both in terms of narrative, in terms of level design, in terms of gameplay. But I think it's kind of better for that. And that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier, where I don't think Devil May Cry is a better game than Devil May Cry's 3 or 4. But I do think it was a better experience for me. I think I enjoyed its very simplistic game design, where almost the entirety of the game takes place within the context of this one castle. I enjoyed the simplistic gameplay, the simplistic puzzles. I enjoyed the simplistic narrative, where it's just Dante has a set goal. He's going to kill Mundus, and that's the narrative. I mean, that he goes out, kills Mundus, that's the end of the story. I kind of enjoy the simplistic nature of this game, where there aren't like a billion plot twists here and there. Unlike Devil May Cry's 2, 3, 4, beyond, where I'm just thinking like, what are we doing with this narrative? Why do we need all of this? I feel like the simplistic nature of this game really benefits it. So while I do think the other games are probably better games, I had a much better experience with this game. It's a much more concise game, so I have it here at number 3. Now at number 2 is an opinion that I know a lot of people will not like. I've seen lists where this is at the very bottom of the list, and I understand why if you're coming from like a hardcore Devil May Cry fan. But for me, as a very casual Devil May Cry fan, at number 2, I have DMC. And I know a lot of people hate this game. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Mind you, I am a big fan of Ninja Theory. I really enjoy them as a company. I liked Heavenly Sword. Enslaved Odyssey to the West is one of my all-time favorite games. So coming into this game, I obviously already knew how Ninja Theory made their games. And I understand why Devil May Cry fans hate it. I mean, it isn't very Devil May Cry. I mean, it feels like they took the general premise of Devil May Cry, where they have, like, obviously Dante, Virgil, and Mundus, and that sort of stuff, and then thrown it into a Ninja Theory game. It does feel like that, but it's still a game that I personally enjoyed. Now, combat-wise, I feel like they did pretty much just copy Devil May Cry. I mean, they didn't really do much to improve there. This was a game that was a lot more focused on platforming, though. I mean, in many ways, over half the game is a puzzle platformer where you have to switch between the heaven and hell weapons to maneuver around the environments, and I found that very enjoyable. I felt like artistically, this is probably one of the best in the entire series. I really love the aesthetics of each of the levels. There's some really crazy stuff that happens here. I mean, which again, doesn't feel very Devil May Cry. It feels more like a No More Heroes sort of game, or I don't know, just any other like wacky Japanesey sort of game. Narratively, I do think this is probably one of the weakest in the series, though. I mean, I think Dante is kind of terrible here. And what they did with Mundus is just really weird, where they just made him a businessman. It's so strange. And then the plot twist at the very end of the story was very predictable. So again, I 100% understand why Devil May Cry fans do not like this game. But coming into this game and kind of having an idea of what to expect, having played previous Ninja Theory games, I enjoyed this game so much more. And to be honest, again, it ranks here at number 2. I really like this game. And now for number 1, which, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, come on, it's Devil May Cry 5. For me, this was very clearly the best game in the series. It wasn't really close. I do think narratively it improves upon everything from the previous games. I think it actually tells a pretty strong narrative. Gameplay-wise, it's more of Devil May Cry, but slightly improved. I mean, I really like that there are obviously 3 characters to play as in this game. There's Dante, Nero, and V, and each of them have their own distinct styles of gameplay. Dante is kind of more what you would expect from Devil May Cry. Nero has these arm attachments that play a major factor in his gameplay. And V is a really weird style of gameplay where you're not actually attacking the enemies. You actually use his companions, these like animals that attack the enemies instead. That was a weird thing to experience. Narratively, it kind of reminded me a lot of actually Devil May Cry 1 in its simplistic nature, in the sense that the entirety of its narrative comprises of you trying to take down Unizen. And each of the characters are on their path to do so. But at the same time, I feel like they take a lot of risks with this narrative as well, where there's a lot of like time manipulation, where like you're seeing certain scenes and you do a flashback and then you flash forward and all that stuff. They do that a lot in this game, and I think that leads to one of the most unique Devil May Cry experiences we've had up to this point. I really enjoyed what they did narratively with V as well, and his character and how he connects to the overall franchise. I like how Nero was portrayed in this game, and Dante was just Dante, even though that dancing scene was just weird. Like, why was that a thing? But again, this is the most modern Devil May Cry game. It's what you would expect. It improves upon everything from previous games, makes it better graphics, better gameplay, better narrative. I really see no reason why this wouldn't be number one on my list. So there we go. Those are my opinions on every Devil May Cry game in this series. And I'm pretty happy that I was able to finally get to playing this series. Obviously, it's a series that's well renowned. It's been around for forever now. 18 years, 19 years. It's a series I've always wanted to get into. To be honest, not my favorite series in the world. Again, I just feel like narratively as a whole, it's not completely there, and gameplay-wise, it's not really my sort of thing. But I still enjoyed the experience of getting to play these games for the first time nonetheless. So there we go. That's the video. Those are my rankings of the games. Thank you for watching.